Hi, this is James Valvis, and if you've been paying attention to what I'm doing, you've noticed that so far I've done only Popinions, which is where I get to play Edgar Allan Poe and put my opinions in that genius's mouth. It's kind of funny. I'm just joking around, but mostly I feel that those opinions are important and they matter, but they're opinions about things outside in the world. There are things about how I view political stuff or how I believe philosophical issues. There are things about how I might feel about a book or how I might feel about something of that nature. The literary world, the things I'm interested in, the things of the world, outside my own self. With the vlog, I'm going to try to do something a little different. I'm going to talk about me, which is not an easy thing for me to do. Um, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this particular vlog, is that I don't like the word vlog, by the way. I didn't like the word blog. I think it's stupid. I think it's a journal or something along those lines. It's a diary. It's a video recording of thoughts. It's anything but a vlog. It's just garbage. But that's what the boys and girls call them these days, so let's go with vlog. The idea that I want to express today in this very first vlog is on vulnerability. Now, vulnerability is an issue for me. I would not say that I'm a power or a control freak, but there is a certain element about me that is very guarded and has always been guarded and needs to be guarded. And that's part of the reason is because it's almost the opposite for people than you would expect. You would think that people who have gone through great trauma would be very vulnerable and open and would share that trauma. And the people who have had great lives doing what they feel like doing or they were treated very well would be closed off. But it's exactly the opposite. What you find most often is that the people who had to really struggle to get by in life are the ones who, for whatever reason, are unable to share the tough things that they had to endure. And the people who are, who have much lesser issues are capable of being open, and sometimes they're so open and they exaggerate the extent of their own misery. Not always. Sometimes the people's misery is real, and misery is always real to the person involved. So a person, if a person thinks that their life was a living hell and they had a life that you know someone like me would look at it and says, my God, you had just the greatest childhood and the greatest life. What the heck are you unhappy about? But to them, misery is always relative. But nevertheless, because of the way I grew up and because of how things were in my life, and not in just my childhood. It wasn't like, my formative years were this way. It was most of my years up until I met my second wife were very difficult years. I mean, most people would say that I went through a lot of hard times and I suffered through a lot of difficult events. If you looked at my life, if you take Jim Valvis out of it and you just said nebulous person out there has endured this, and this, you would feel great pity for that individual. Now, for some reason, whenever I try to explain that I was molested as a child or that I was beaten to the point where I was pissing blood, or I had a coffee cup broken over my head, or I was beaten by ghetto youths to within an inch of my life. I was thrown into a fire. I was all these things, when you put them all together, and this doesn't include, my first marriage, which was disastrous in a lot of ways, becoming homeless 3 times, the various other ways in which I was misused or abused in a lot of ways. Those things would inspire great pity for a lot of people. But we live in a time that, first of all, I'm a white male, and now I'm a Christian white male. I wasn't a Christian white male for a long time. I was an atheist. But I'm a Christian white male now, heterosexual on top of it. And those people don't generally get a lot of pity from anybody. It doesn't matter what you go through. You're going to have all your limbs blown off. I mean, maybe if you have all your limbs blown off in a war, they'll feel sorry for you a bit, and then they'll say you were stupid for joining or something like that. But on top of that, I'm just a kind of person who doesn't like to put forward a sob story. And there's a very good reason for that. When you grow up in the ghetto, when you grow up in tough situations and you experience tough situations, you can't afford to feel sorry for yourself. If you sit there feeling sorry for yourself too long or too much, you will end up dead. There is no way you can survive it, because you're constantly being given reasons to feel bad. You're constantly given reasons to doubt yourself. You're constantly given reasons to want to kill yourself. You're constantly given reasons to say, I'm going to fail. I'm not going to make it. You're constantly given reasons to say, there's no future for me, ever. You're constantly told that you're scum or worthless. You're constantly in pain from being beaten or being abused. You're constantly in pain because the woman that you're with is leaving you for somebody else who's done better because they have greater advantages than you. They're constantly in a state of surprise and shock at how cruel people can be toward somebody who's down and out. We talk a lot about compassion, and eventually I will get to, maybe I'll do a opinion on compassion, because we really need to talk about compassion as a society, because we greatly misunderstand what it is. And a lot of times compassion is used less as a way of helping people and more of a way of ennobling or feeling good about oneself. That's not really compassion at all. That's just a plea to one's own vanity. But I suffered great trauma as a child, and it is not an exaggeration to say that, I can give you one example. Let's give you an example, because there are many examples, and I can list them off, and I'm talking hundreds, if not thousands of examples. I've written poems about them, I've written stories about them, but nobody really reads this stuff very much. And when they do read it, they kind of divorce it from you. They think that you're writing just art, and in a way I am. I don't write poetry to be therapeutic, and I don't write it to be confessional in the sense that I'm saying, look at this so that you feel bad for me. I'm writing it so that you look at it and you think about life and how you want to be living it. So we're going to come to an example. All right. For a period of time, roughly about a year, I was molested by a cousin, and this molestation was oral in nature for most of it, and then he began to rape me. He held me down and he raped me. Once that happened, once it transferred over to that, I said, I have to find a way to get out of this. I can't keep living like this. I was maybe about 10 years old. And so I went to my sister and I told her. And my sister was my great confidant. And she eventually became the character that I used in I converted her to a character called Big Alabama, and we've had a great falling out. I no longer talk to her, but she part of the reason I never talked to her is because she ended up calling me conceited and everything. So this is a wide opinion about me, is that I'm arrogant and I'm stuck up and I think I'm too good for people. Well, in reality, I just think that we really ought to be better to one another. When I say these things, when I make calls to be virtuous, to be moral, they see that as conceited, but I see that as survival. I see it as a way of looking out at the world and saying, how can it be better for my daughter than it was for me? And if you're not going to be moral, if you're not going to be virtuous, if we're not going to have calls to be virtuous, we're always going to feel compassion for everybody who does horrible things, then you're only going to end up with bad results. Anyway, so I went to my sister and I told her, I said, this has been happening to me for some time. And I don't know what to do about it. And she said to me, I'll take care of it. And my sister went back to my parents, and we were at dinner, and my sister at dinner told my parents what had been happening to me while I was sitting there. And of course my parents flipped out. And since they lived in the apartment above us, there was a great commotion. There was there was terrible accusations. There was all kinds of horrible things, threatening to call the police. And my mother put her hand through a door. My father was just livid. My stepfather at the time. So this went on, and eventually things calmed down. They decided not to go to the police. They decided that it would be harder on me if I had, if there were legal proceedings involved with this. I don't know how much of that was really, how much it would be harder on me or harder on them. I'm sure that it was a combination of those two, where they were looking out for themselves and they didn't want to live with the shame of the fact that their child had been molested. And so I don't know how long passed, maybe a week. My stepfather was an alcoholic. He was a very good man usually, generally speaking. I've written about this, but he had a drinking problem, and when he drank, he was violent. He was a nasty drunk. He was a good man, but he was a nasty drunk. And when he drank, all the anger and frustration and despair within him came out, and he took it out on whatever was around him. Well, my father had a tough time dealing with this molestation business, as any parent would, by the way. But his way of dealing with this kind of stuff was to drink, and he went out and drank. And he got very drunk. He got extremely drunk. I was in my bedroom. It was a very small bedroom, no more than a walk-in closet that I shared with my brother. And I remember listening to him because he would play the music very loud. He always played like country music. And it was usually Johnny Cash, Mel Tillis, Conway Twitty, guys like that. He was from Hoboken, New Jersey, but he liked the country music guys. He was a big country fan. He'd wear black like Johnny Cash, and sometimes he'd wear a cowboy hat. And eventually, as I was listening to this music play and knowing what's coming, knowing that, he's out there stewing, and knowing what he's stewing about, knowing it's not about, the work that he doesn't like, and it's not about the wife that really doesn't much love him anymore, and it's not about, all the usual things that bother him, but it's about this. It's about what's been going on and what had been going on. And the fact that, I was, that this happened, and not only did it happen, but I allowed it to happen. And I allowed it to happen for a long time. And so, eventually, he came to the door, and he said, "Come out here." Now, I was no stranger to beatings. I would get beatings all the time. If I did something wrong, or I didn't take out the garbage when he told me to, we'd take off the belt, and I would get 3 or 4 straps across the butt and back, and they would leave little welts on the skin, like little worms that would be burrowing under there. And so this would happen for, it happened all through my childhood. So I'm no stranger to beatings, Sometimes these beatings would go on 10, 15 minutes, sometimes longer. But, sometimes I would beg for him to stop. He'd hold one arm and he'd be strapping me with a leather belt, and I would be begging for him to stop, and people would laugh at me because I was begging, like my mother and my sister. And so at this time, the beating that he proceeded to give me was horrendous. It was nonstop, constant, and it wasn't with a belt, it was with his fists. And he beat me so badly, he put me through a wall. I mean, not literally through a wall, but there was a plaster wall. I broke through the plaster. He put me, he threw me against the chair that busted. My head smashed against a glass. That glass busted. He was, he didn't take off his belt, but he did grab something, and I don't know. I no longer remember what it was, and it was, he hit me with it. I think it might have been a bottle. It might have been an ashtray. I forget what it was, but it was solid. It was glass of some sort, and it hit me in the arm, and I thought that my arm busted. I don't think it did, but I thought it did. I was bleeding from the nose and the ear, and he was still coming after me, and my sister, and the only time that anybody ever stopped him from hitting me, my sister, she felt bad because she had told my parents, so she came out and put herself between me and him, and that's the only thing that stopped him. And eventually he started crying, and he got on his knees and he kissed me, and then he sent me to bed. And you can't explain this to people in a poem, really. If you try to do it, it'll come across as maudlin. It'll come across as self-pitying. It'll come across as unbelievable, even. You say, oh, well, yeah, there's Valvis again talking about his hard times. At least I feel that way. But I just, even part of me just talking about this, I find it repellent. There's just nothing good about going back there and dealing with that. And dealing with that past and all that hurt and all that anger and all that upset. The guy is dead. He did what he did. I'm not dead. I'm not worried about it. I'm not living that. And so I don't live that kind of life. But I do feel sometimes that when I go out into the world and when I give an opinion, and I'm told that I've got privilege, or that I have, I've been given advantages that other people haven't been given, or I'm conceited, or I'm stuck up, or I don't care about people because I have this political view or that political view, or because I demand that there be this kind of logic rather than, some kind of emotionalism attached to it. I always think, God, you just have no idea. You have no clue. You're not living in the same reality that I am. And there's no way I can get that across to them. There's no way that I can express that kind of vulnerability without just seeming like a schmuck, even to myself. So, when I first started writing online, I had a small journal called the Journal of Muck. I remember when I started it, and I had no readers. And then I had Ron Androla as a reader. And Ron Androla was one of the people who has befriended me. I was friends with him for 25 years. For 25 years I was friends with Ron Androla. And we talked about everything, and I supported his work, and he took lines from my poems and used them as titles, and I published his work. He published my work. And, just a great friendship. And I loved the guy. Absolutely loved him. I didn't agree with everything he said. I don't agree with anything anybody says. Well, I shouldn't say anything anybody says, but I don't agree with everything anybody says. But just recently, he found out that I supported Trump a little bit more than I probably should have, and the guy dropped me. He blocked me on his journal on his message board that I've been on for 20 years. 20 years I've been supporting him and bringing people in to read his stuff and putting my stuff out there so that it raises the quality of the work that's being presented there. And he just dumped me, and ostensibly because I'm a bad person. I mean, that's the reason why you would get rid of somebody out of your life, because you think that they're a bad person. And so, yeah, when I first started writing a journal online, I called it the Journal of Muck, and I had one reader, which was Ron Androla, and then I had a few other readers, and then I ended up having quite a few readers. But in the process between building that audience, I talked to a woman who was very popular back then, and she's nowhere to be seen now. I just don't know I don't even remember her name, but she was very popular then. She had thousands and thousands of readers, and her writing was all about what she did that day. It was basically navel gazing. I mean, completely. I mean, even what I'm doing here is not completely navel gazing. I'm talking about an idea, but she was completely navel gazing. I went to the store today. I went to, I spent time in the garden. I did this. It was just completely that. It had nothing wider than that. But she had a large audience, and a much larger audience than I had, and probably still have. And I said to her, I don't know why. And all her friends were like that as well. They all wrote like that. They were all, they're mostly women, but not all women, mostly women. And I would say to her, and I said to her one time, I'm like, I'm writing these poems, and I'm writing these short stories, and I'm writing these essays, and they don't get the same attention that your stuff gets, even though you're not really putting any time into what you're doing. And it's basically just one, sentence after another about banal garbage in your life. And she said, well, I don't read people who don't seem like a friend to me. And to this day, I've had trouble with that. I've had trouble with it in two ways. In the first way, I've never been able to really make friends like that. I just haven't. No matter how well I write, I just don't make friends. People read my stuff and they think, wow, that's terrific, that's great, that's like the best poem I ever wrote. But they don't go on to the next poem. They don't go on to the next story. They don't try to find out more about me. They don't feel any kind of loyalty toward me. I'm saying this in the largest. There are exceptions, and those exceptions usually go on for a short period of time. But for the most part, that's not what happens for me. I don't develop. I never get this kind of loyalty built up to people. They never defend me. They never, if someone's calling me out on Facebook nobody ever comes to my defense. Nobody ever says, you know what, I've known this Jim Valvis guy a long time. You don't get to call him a racist because he's a terrific guy. That almost never happens. I can't think of many times where it has happened, where somebody has actually come to my defense. And even people I know, people I've been friends with since high school, or friends with for 20 or 30 years in the poetry world, or people I've been I hung out with, people I took into my home, people I've helped out, people I've given money to, the last of my money, my rent money, will not do this kind of thing for me. They will not stand up for me. It's just bizarre. It's a bizarre thing. I mean, the only real exception I can think of about this is my wife. The only person who ever stands up for me. But other than that, it doesn't happen. And so, getting back to that woman and the friendship thing, the other way it doesn't work out for me is that's not really what I want to do as an artist. I don't really want to make friends in that way. It's not what I'm trying to accomplish as an artist. Don't get me wrong, I would like to have friends. I would like to have people come to my defense when I'm called horrible names. I would like to have a large following, especially for the work. I would like to have people, who I've been friends with a long time, show the same kind of loyalty toward me that I feel toward them. I would like all that. It would be wonderful. But as an artist, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to be somebody's friend online. That is not my goal. My goal as an artist is to create art. Is to create something that's lasting, something that will mean something to a large number of people, if not, hopefully, all people. Everybody who lives, everybody who takes in air today, yesterday, 1,000 years from now, I want them to be able to read what I write and say, yes, that's exactly how it is, or how it was, or how it should be. And whether or not I get up and make the souffle or not just doesn't really matter in that sense. But the problem with that attitude, the problem with the wanting to create universal art, is that we begin to see the artist in rather almost Machiavellian terms. This guy is not something human. And that's kind of how we do see great artists. And I'm not saying that I'm a great artist. That's my attempt, is to be a great artist. But we see great artists, and we don't think of them as people who are just people, and they have needs, and they have failings. I mean, basically, in order for an artist to get that kind of sympathy, they have to kill themselves, which may explain why a great number of them do. They go out and, a Sylvia Plath or an Ernest Hemingway or a Richard Brautigan or somebody like that looks around and says, well, they love me they love the work when the work is out there. And they love that. But boy, they don't think much of me, do they? And there's a part of them that rebels against that, even if they write confessionally. An Anne Sexton and a Sylvia Plath wrote very confessional work, but I don't think that confession is the reason really they wrote. And so it might have been the reason they started writing, but it's not the reason they wrote eventually. And the reason they wrote eventually is because they wanted to produce great art, which is why they did produce great art. You don't accidentally create great art. It doesn't happen that way. It's just not something that happens. You can accidentally create, a scientific discovery, for instance. You could be like mixing in solution A with a solution Z and O knock over solution X, and all of a sudden you've got, super putty or something. Who knows? But you can't really do that with a poem. You can't really do that with a short story. You can't really do that with a novel or a play or anything that requires sustained concentration and effort in the arts. You just can't do it. It just doesn't happen. And if it does happen, if you think it happens, you're mistaken. You look at a Jackson Pollock, right? And I'm sorry, that's not great art. If it's just the paint just happened to hit the canvas in that way, that's not art. That's accident. Just call it as it is. It's not art. It's an accident. And if you're writing like that, then you're not creating art. But when you do this, when you're trying, when that's what you do, when you're giving forth an opinion, and you've thought about that opinion a long time, and you sit down and you write an essay and you say, this is how it is in the world, that can seem uncompromising. Now, you may not have started off uncompromising. You may have done a lot of stinking research to get to that point. And believe me, I have. I have done a lot of reading and a lot of research to form the opinions I have. I won't give an opinion unless I've really researched the heck out of that opinion. I just won't give it. Because I come, again, I have been beaten so many times for saying a stupid thing. I give an example of this. When I was a young man, I would say I was about, again, maybe 10 years old. All this stuff runs into, it might have been 12. And my dad said to my Uncle Teddy, well, you could watch the baseball game. There was only one problem with that. I knew there was no baseball game. There couldn't have been a baseball game because it was January. Okay? There are no baseball games. There are no Mets games in January. It's just a rule. And I said to Dad, Dad, you're wrong. He can't watch a baseball game. It's not on. And Uncle Teddy had been around long enough to hold his tongue and to realize you don't correct the host. You just go along with it and you say, oh, okay, I guess I'll watch the game. But I was a young kid and I said, no, Dad, there's just no way there's a baseball game. You have to look. Are you sure? He said, it's right here. It's right here in the TV guide. He can watch the Mets. It's right here. I'm looking at it. And of course, he was looking at an old TV guide, a TV guide that was months old. And when he discovered that, he apologized to Uncle Teddy. Uncle Teddy went off to watch television, and then he put down the TV guide, the new one that he picked up, and he took the back of his hand and he put it through my head. And that's the kind of thing that sometimes telling people the truth will get you. And that's the kind of thing that if they don't want to hear it, if it deflates their ego in any way, if it makes them feel bad about the stuff that they did or the stuff that they thought, or God forbid their core values, whatever those core values may be, or however justified they are in holding them, if you do that to them, that is going to create an animosity. And it doesn't matter. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter how right you are. It doesn't. If I say to people, for instance, that Donald Trump did not mock a disabled reporter, which is absolute fact, he did not do this, even though it's widely believed that he did. Like 80, if you ask the American public if he did this, 85% would say that he did, 10% would say they don't know, and 5% would say he didn't. That 5%, they're right. They're 100% right. But if you tell people this, if you disabuse them of this notion, and that's something that they hold dear, that's something that they want to believe, then you're going to see repercussions for that. And it doesn't matter one iota that you're right. It doesn't matter. And then it doesn't matter if you abused your whole life, or if you've suffered, or you're suicidal. They will come after you. They will hate you for that. And this isn't a right-left thing. This isn't a Trump, Hillary thing. This is universal. This is all people are this way. And so what we see most often is we've seen a retreat from any kind of informed opinion being given about anything. And people stick to whatever it is that doesn't make waves. Because if you can do those two things, if you can stick to things that don't make waves, if you could talk about your favorite baseball team, or you could talk about, whatever book you like, or whatever books you care about, or if you talk about things that nobody finds controversial. Oh, today I went to the park. Nobody finds that controversial. And then on top of it, you talk about the things that are that make you seem vulnerable. and make you seem like you need nurturing and caring. This is especially true for women. If you're a person who's like, oh, poor you, you need nurturing and caring, and you like baseball, then you're going to have lots of people like you. But if you're a person who says, well, maybe I like baseball, but what I really want to talk to you about is how compassion is being abused in the political system. And by the way, I'm not going to talk about anything about, my struggles, because to do that would be, offensive to me or whatever. Then yeah, you're going to have a hard time getting people to be loyal to you. And so I know how to go about bringing more people in, to make them feel as if to make them want to be more friendly to me. The problem is that I just can't do it on any consistent level. I've never been able to do it on a consistent level. And part of me doesn't want to. Part of me wants to be what I am, which is a writer of ideas and a writer of craft and skill. I don't want people to like me because I was molested as a kid. I just don't want that. That's not what I want to be remembered for, or what I want people to think about when they think about me. That's something that happened to me, but that isn't me. And it isn't, the sum total of me. And it's not something I want to use to win an audience. And yet, I know that if I continue on the way I'm going, my work won't have any audience at all, because people tend to see me as heartless. That's not true. It's never been true. But they get away with it because mostly I'm guarded. Mostly I'm still that kid in his room thinking that thin sheet of covers will stop the guy from coming in and dragging me out. Thanks for listening to this talk on vulnerability. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this discussion. And be sure to check out the poems as they come out, because that's what's really important to me. And God bless.